Hey friends, and welcome to another video. In today's video, we are going to be using Lunar Paste. I've been showing the Lunar Paste a lot, and someone said that they couldn't really see the shine of the Lunar Paste. And I realized I never have just applied the Lunar Paste down in full layers to really share the amazing shine. So in today's video, we're going to be showing a couple different techniques that really makes them shine on your card making projects. So without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, so I've got a piece of my stark white cardstock. I'm going to use a palette knife, and I always like to have a little bit of paper towel on hand to clean things up as well. So I'm going to grab a little bit onto my palette knife here. I'm going to kind of spread it across the top, starting off with bee sting, and then I just lightly take my palette knife and just kind of spread this color going downwards. I'm not applying too much of a pressure, because if you do, it'll just scrape it right off the surface. So just lightly kind of tap it on and spread this color. We don't want too thick of a layer. We want it to still dry pretty quickly. So I'm just applying a little bit down there. And with this first color, we can put any excess right back into the jar like that. Then I'll make sure to clean it off a little bit onto my paper towel. That's why this is nice to have. And then we'll bring in our second color. Here we're using some traffic cone. Again, I'm going to take it and spread it going across first. You can kind of decide if we need a little bit more. And then we're going to go in and bring this upwards and bring it down to kind of blend it together. So just kind of mixing these two colors in like that. I find they blend and create this really cool kind of marble look, which I love. And last but not least, we're going to bring in a little bit of my slippery when wet. I love this kind of golden yellow color, and then kind of pull it in an upward motion to blend it together. And then again, going in a downward motion, we can blend some of that traffic cone into the yellow. It just depends on kind of which direction you're brushing it and how you're going to get those colors moving and blending together. I love how these colors kind of blended together, and it'll of course get more shiny as it dries. But I'm going to go in with my Nature Hike background stamp and take this red rubber stamp and place it down into my paste. Now I'm just going to give it kind of a light pressure. You don't need to press down a ton, just a light pressure all across the surface to create kind of an indent. And it'll stick into there, and then lift it off, and we get a beautiful print of that leaf pattern inside of my paste. And because it's a nice thick paste, it's going to hold all that awesome texture. Alright, so I'm going to set this off to the side to dry. I don't heat set it if it's that thick of a layer. Just let it dry for about 30 minutes to an hour, and it'll be nice and dry so you can keep working with it. Now when it comes to this, I want to just lightly mist this all over. While this is still wet, I'll go in with a piece of my stark white cardstock and take a nice print from this, and it's going to give us that really beautiful stamped background, which I just love this. And then of course we can go in and clean this off. You want to do it pretty quickly. I'm going to go in with some water. You can also use some stamp cleaner, and I like this Ranger Rub It Scrub It because it's got some texture to get into those grooves. So I'm just going to scrub to get all of my paste off of that stamp. Alright, so I pulled in some backgrounds that I did last night that are completely dry, and you can really see once that dries and the kind of shininess from just being a liquid goes away, it gets this really beautiful metallic shine, and it holds all of that amazing texture. And then here is the background second impression stamped, and you can see it loses a little bit of the shine because you're adding a lot less down and some water, but it still is just so stunning. Alright, to finish off this background, I'm going to go in with my paper trimmer and just trim it down to give it a nice even border all the way around. Alright, and then I'm going to adhere this down onto my card base with a little bit of foam tape. Now I'm going to go in with the same exact colors of my inks, so slippery and wet. Then we'll go in with a little bit of traffic cone and some bee sting onto our craft sheet. And I'm just going to take a little bit of water and mist it down onto the surface, and we'll bring our piece of cardstock right into here and do a little bit of dipping into the cardstock to get some beautiful color onto the surface there. Now I like to heat set in between layers using this Ranger Heat It tool. It dries the layers nicely without kind of moving the ink around. And drying that ink a little bit in between is just going to allow different layers to sit on top without all of the ink just sinking together, which is really quite helpful. So you can see that when you do this, you get those little tiny ink droplets, which is super cool texture. All right, and then if there's still some white areas that you don't want in there, I just go in with a little bit of a blending tool and some of the same colors. So here I'm going in with a little bit of traffic cone and kind of blending in some of those areas. I'll bring in a little bit of bee sting near this side, and I just don't want any really bright white showing. And then we can go in with our black ink and ink up the nature hike background stamp one more time. And this time I'm going to take my background and place it onto the stamp and then use a pressure tool. This one is the Debbie tool, and I usually use this in the Misty, but I have been finding it really easy to get great pressure all over a background stamp too. So I love that. And then I'm going to lift it off my surface, and there we have our background and our really beautifully watercolored leaves. All right, now I loved this whole background by itself, but I've cut out a couple of different leaves that I want to use on today's card, and I'm just going to quickly fussy cut right around them, leaving a little bit of a colored border all the way around the images. And to do this, I'm just using my Fiskars Spring Assist scissors. You guys know I always recommend these just because they spring back out at you, so they don't make your hands tired at all when you're cutting these out, but also they're really easy to get into all these tiny little areas because they've got a really nice kind of fine point to them. So that is why I love fussy cutting out with these. They are kind of a game changer. All right, so once these are all cut out, I've laid them down in little groupings so that it makes the triangle on the card. I find that that kind of helps with the visual interest. And once that's all complete, we're gonna pop them up on some foam squares for a little bit of dimension. When I'm doing this as well, I like to make sure that they kind of hang over the edge. I find that that helps add a little bit of dimension and depth to the card. And with some of the littler ones, I'll just add them with some liquid adhesive because that will give a whole nother layer as well instead of having them all at the same exact height. I love this little thanks die from scrapbook.com, so I'm gonna run this through about 3 times through my die cutting machine to do some layering. Right, so it's time for another installment of me awkward die cutting in the back. So once these are cut out, I've added a little bit of liquid adhesive, and to adhere them together, I just go in and put one die cut on top of the other, and the adhesive is gonna give us just a little bit of wiggle room to just kind of pinch these little areas together slightly, and that's gonna help this all line up really easily. So just pinch it at some of the points, and it'll make the dies line up. And then I'm going to press down the sentiment right on the center of my card. So I love this really beautiful paste background with the Lunar Paste. You guys can really see all of that amazing shine now and how it kept that impression of the stamp, which I think is so incredibly cool. All right, moving on into the next card, I'm using this Flower Maker Stencil, which was released at the beginning of my line, but it's this really fun layering stencil. And with these pastes, I like to add them as accents right at the end, but I'm gonna show you a way to really make them still shine on your card. So starting off with this center flower first, I'm going to grab my triple berry ink pad and I'm just going to blend this in. I like to use my domed blender, but of course you could use a blending brush as well. And I like this stencil because it's going to provide you some nice layering with each individual layer because we can start off dark in the center and then bring it out and make it a little bit lighter. And there it's got a couple different shades with just one layer of the stencil, which is super cool. Now I'm leaving this next layer for when we add the paste down. So just save that for later and we'll move over to the center of the flower. Most of these things are kind of in rows here. I'm gonna bring in just a little bit of our slippery and wet ink. And you could always tape things off too if you want to be even more careful, but just using the edge of my blending tool, and then we'll go in with this tiny little detailed center. And for this, we're gonna need one of those little detail blending tools. These really come in handy when it comes to different layering stencils or getting to small areas like this, because you really can't get into that with a bigger blending tool. So just kind of press the ink down into there, and it'll transfer really nicely. And then we get that beautiful little pattern. And again, starting off into the center, you want to kind of be careful of these little areas. So just kind of follow the same direction as those little points while you're blending. And that's going to help you not mess up your stencil and keep all those amazing little details in there. So then we can pull that layer off. There we have the first layer of the flower. Then again, follow this line, move it over, and we can add our second grouping of petals in right here. So line it up just so that it's right in between there. You don't need to kind of shift the stencil or anything. And then again, start kind of in the center, add a little bit of darker ink down, and then kind of blend it and fade it out to the edges there. All right, then we're gonna add this bottom of the flower in. This is kind of the center of the flower. And again, we'll go in with just a little bit of slippery when wet to add that little detail in right there. But then this part of the flower we're gonna do with a little bit of paste again to make that part stand out and shine. All right, let's do this. So starting off with a little bit of bee sting here, I'm gonna go in, bring in my little palette knife, and again, I have a little bit of paper towel already prepared onto the side. Now this layer, we're gonna go in, and all you need to do is just cover up the center with that center part right there, and then kind of press the petals so that they're going to go every other in between. And once we've got that, we're gonna go in and do our paste. Now, of course, you could tape this down. You could use a little pixie spray if you'd like, but the paste is kind of this perfect in-between consistency where it's not too thick so that it's really easy to spread, and then it's also not too thin where it's really gonna go underneath the stencil. And lift it off, and there we have that really awesome detail. Then we're gonna wanna clean our stencil as quick as possible. So I'll go in with a little bit of paper towel and easily kind of wipe this off and be kind of delicate because like I said, there are some little areas that we don't wanna rip in any stencil. Now with this, since it's kind of a thinner layer, we can easily go in here and heat set this with our Ranger Heat It tool. Just keep the heat tool kind of moving around, and I find that since it's not a super concentrated heat with this heat tool, it's not going to bubble up or anything like that, which I really like. All right, so that's pretty much dry, and you guys can see, like I said, once it dries, that metallic shine just really comes to life and pops off that paper. So then, with this next layer, we're gonna wanna go in with a little bit of our slippery when wet paste. I'm just gonna go in with my palette knife, smooth it over just a little bit, quite a bit too much on that surface. So we'll lift it off, and there is our center there, but then we can go in here, and like I said, I added too much, but we can easily go in and put that right back into our jar. All right, now let's talk about doing the leaves. When I do things like this, I go in with these Altenew blending brushes. They have different sizes. You can also go in with the Ranger detail blending tools and do the exact same thing. And we're just going to go in, kind of place wherever we want our leaf down there, go in with our lightest color first, and I'm gonna start from the outside and work my way in. And all I'm gonna do here is bring in a little bit of that color and go pretty close to the edge of that flower, but not overlapping it. We just want the color to come right up next to the flower. And then to add a little bit of shading, we'll go in with some fake plant and bring that in kind of right on the edge there to add a little bit of darker color and bring in some depth and dimension to the leaves. And once we lift that off, you can see it really brings kind of the flowers to life to add these different leaves down onto the images. And if they're smaller too, I like to do them in little groupings. So here I'm gonna add one right next to the bigger leaf to add a little bit of visual interest together. All right, now I wanna add this onto a different background. So once again, I'm going in with my Fiskars Spring Assist scissors. You totally don't need to do this, but it's just something that I'm doing to add a little bit more interest to the card. And I'm just going to cut it out with a little bit of a white border all the way around the different flowers we created. For the background, I'm going to be using the Water Marble background stamp, and I want a tone-on-tone kind of effect. So I'm gonna go in with a little bit of my traffic cone ink and swipe it all over the surface here to add the ink down. And then to make it more even, I just kind of dab it out a little bit like this. And then we're gonna stamp it down onto a tomato soup card base. This is from Gina K. I love her different colors. Take your pressure tool if you have one, or just rub your fingers all over it to give some good and even pressure. All right, this background is just stunning. I love how that stamps down and that really beautiful depth and dimension that it gives the background. All right, I love this lovely Lantana stamp set for the sentiments, and I think I'm gonna use the "You Are So Much Stronger Than You Think." All right, guys, here is that finished card with the sentiment. I love going back and revisiting old stencils like the Flower Maker stencil, but adding that Lunar Paste really brings a whole new life and shine to it, which I just think is so stunning. All right, guys, I hope you really enjoyed today's video and seeing the full shine of the Lunar Paste with some of these techniques. Leave a comment down below which card was your favorite, and give this video a big thumbs up and hit that subscribe button if you enjoyed it and want to see more like this one from me. All right, guys, I'll see you very soon, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye!